Today on the Insight Atlas, we will examine why marketing funnels don't work and where your customers go before making a purchase. We are talking about the clear reality that anyone managing a marketing budget must face. You allocate significant resources to drive traffic to your site. The visitor arrives, examines your product, and quietly leaves the page. Why?
And a few days later, they make a purchase from a competitor whose ad they have never even seen. The main question on everyone's mind is, we spent this budget, so where did these customers disappear to?
Actually, they didn't disappear anywhere. They simply didn't enter the linear sales funnel invented in 1898. The consumer now falls into that void between the moment they see the ad and the moment they purchase, namely the messy middle.
In this episode at the Insight Atlas table, we are decoding exactly at which stage your budget melts away and goes into your competitor's pocket, centering on Google's behavioral science data.
In this video, we cover the following step by step. How do companies lose that huge battle in the middle while only focusing on the top and bottom of the funnel? What exactly should you do to avoid being eliminated in that endless exploration and evaluation loop the consumer enters?
What are the 4 mental shortcuts that will turn that decision directly in your favor when the customer is lost among dozens of tabs, forums, and reviews? Category heuristics, social proof, authority bias, and the power of now.
Most importantly, we are discussing the positioning strategy that will prevent your awareness investments from turning into your competitors' sales.
How do you manage the competition process without cutting prices? How can you settle into the customer's mind at the right moments and strategic points?
Let's say you are going to buy a new cloud software for your company or an espresso machine for your home. You saw an ad, the product caught your attention, and clicked the link. You checked the price. Do you pay and buy it at that moment? No. You minimize the tab and open a new search page. That exact moment is when that old sales funnel shatters to pieces and the customer falls into that area we call the messy middle.
Seeing the ad is just a trigger. The real process begins after that trigger. Google researchers define this area as an endless loop that the consumer enters. When the customer enters this area, they bounce between 2 different mental states, exploration and evaluation.
In the exploration phase, the customer multiplies the options. They make searches like best espresso machines or most affordable espresso machines. They come across many different brands and models. Then they move on to the evaluation phase, trying to narrow down the options. They start watching videos like Brand A complaints or Brand B versus Brand C comparison.
Just as they're about to decide, they see a completely different Brand D on a forum site. They go back to the beginning and start exploring again. This cycle takes hours, sometimes weeks. So what are the factors that complicate things this much? Why don't people just walk into a store, buy the product, and leave like they used to?
The first factor is information obesity. In the past, accessing information was costly. Making decisions was easy. Now, information is limitless, but attention is very limited. Decision fatigue kicks in. The second factor is that transition friction is zero. A customer walking out of your store and into a competitor's store used to require effort. Now your competitor's storefront is as close as clicking the other tab at the top of the screen.
We talked about information obesity and zero transition friction. So what kind of reaction does this situation cause at the moment of purchase? Let's talk about how the brain freezes when the customer has perhaps many different options and thousands of reviews in front of them. In psychology, we call this the paradox of choice. While trying to make the best decision, the customer is exposed to so much data that they experience mental paralysis.
Absolutely. Let's visualize this with a purchasing process. Let's say a company executive is going to renew their IT infrastructure or server systems. In the past, 2 or 3 clear proposals would land on their desk, they would choose one and get up from the table. Now, when they open the internet, they face dozens of different cloud architectures, hundreds of physical server hardware options, hardware providers, and thousands of conflicting technical reviews.
The abundance of options looks like freedom, but in practice, it locks the brain. In that pile of information, the customer begins to experience the fear of, what if I choose the wrong infrastructure? What if I crash the system and waste the budget? The fear of making a mistake suppresses the desire to purchase. The customer cannot decide and closes that tab saying, let me examine this in detail later. The sale freezes right there.
That postponement is exactly the moment the customer completely falls into the well of the messy middle. So the real problem companies need to solve at the table is this. How do brands turn this loop where competitors are just a click away to their advantage?
Not by piling more options, more technical documents, and more complex features in front of the consumer. Brands must stop being just an ordinary option on the table in this cycle and become a decision process manager.
A very accurate definition. While in that loop, the customer doesn't hear the brand shouting, "Our processor is this fast, our product is this good." However, they safely take refuge in the brand that simplifies that pile of information and takes the burden of decision-making off the customer's shoulders by saying, "For a structure of your scale, this is the safest, most cost-effective, and error-free solution."
While your competitors are racing technical features and confusing the customer even more, the moment you give them the exit map out of that chaos, that endless loop ends in your cash register. The only way to beat the paradox of choice is to safely narrow down the options.
So, how can we get the customer out of that loop? The first step is to be visible in every area. While the customer is comparing you with your competitor in the evaluation phase, you don't have the luxury of just waiting on your own website. Alongside your product page, you must constantly appear before them with independent review articles, comparison videos, and your presence in consumer forums. If you are not there at the moment of decision, all your previous advertising spending goes to waste.
Let's consider this situation with real case studies so that everything falls into place perfectly. Let's take a company selling enterprise marketing software on the B2B side. The company catches the eye of a marketing manager with a very well-constructed LinkedIn campaign. The manager sees the ad, realizes the need, but doesn't buy the product or start the subscription right then.
They won't start it because at that moment they were only triggered. They close the tab, go to Google, and make searches like best marketing automation tools, or compare with a rival brand by searching software X versus software Y. This is exactly where the war breaks out. Your company might just be waiting, having prepared a features page on its own site.
But in that middle area, before coming to your site, the consumer is reading the best software of 2026 list on an independent tech vlog. They're watching a detailed screen recording review prepared by an industry strategist on YouTube. In Reddit or industry forums, they're browsing threads like, which one has better customer service? If your brand isn't present in those independent areas, in those comparison videos, and in the solution suggestions on those forums, the purchasing desire you created flows directly into the cash register of the competitor mentioned in the forum.
Let's consider the same equation on the B2C side. For example, let's go with a brand selling natural skincare products. You ran a very clean, aesthetic brand awareness campaign on social media. The consumer saw that natural ingredient mask or serum and was impressed. But before buying, they want to see that product in a review by an independent skincare expert on YouTube.
They're searching, does it really work? Are the ingredients as clean as promised? And reading user experiences about that product on beauty forums or complaint sites. The consumer is not looking for those flawless studio shots you put on your own site, but the unfiltered experience of real people.
Exactly this. If you just run ads and retreat to your corner, that customer will add your competitor's product to their cart. The competitor who fills the gap in the middle area, has independent reviews on YouTube, and has a strong presence in user forums.
So being visible in every area doesn't mean hanging up million lira billboards everywhere. It means positioning yourself strategically on those third-party platforms in objective comparisons and in detailed case studies where the customer seeks trust while researching. It is to stop speaking on your own behalf and to create an ecosystem that will speak for you within that cycle.
A very accurate definition. The second and most valid step is to be the solution to your customers' decision fatigue with your brand. Actually, the issue isn't so much about making the best product, but positioning yourself as the most easily preferable option during that complex research process. Whoever lightens the mental load of the customer will be the one pulling the sale out of that chaos. So, how do we cure this decision fatigue? When the brain is amidst chaos, it gets tired and prefers the shortest route, meaning it looks for cognitive shortcuts. Your brand should be that shortcut. But how? The first way to achieve this is to understand and use the decision filters in the customer's mind. Decision filters are the automatic filters a consumer creates in their mind to be able to make quick decisions in a specific product category. Let me give you an example. You are researching to buy a new smartphone or computer. You don't sit down and read the motherboard's circuit diagrams, the processor's silicon architecture, or engineering details.
Exactly. The brain doesn't want to deal with that much data. To conserve energy, it immediately looks for familiar labels belonging to that category. Is the memory 256 gigabytes? Does the battery last all day? Does the camera shoot clearly at night? These are category heuristics.
Exactly this. While your customer is drowning among dozens of tabs in that evaluation loop, trying to make them read pages of technical PDFs kills the sale right that second. Instead, the moment you address these decision filters directly and give the message 256 gigabyte memory, all-day battery life, 12 installments at cash price, and free shipping that will catch their attention at first glance, you disable that heavy calculation load in the customer's mind. The customer relaxes by saying, "Okay, the main features I'm looking for are here."
We have lifted that initial heavy calculation load off the customer's shoulders with mental filters. But there is still a critical question on the table that needs to be answered. Why does the customer freeze on that cart page even though they like everything? What is the main thing keeping them from making that final click?
In a word, fear of making a mistake. The human brain cannot fully trust its own judgments, especially when making a complex decision. Right at that moment of deadlock, you need to put the strongest trump card on the table that will turn that fear into trust. Social proof.
So how does this trump card work in practice? Let's explain this with a very clear everyday scenario on the B2C side, a robot vacuum war. The customer has been researching for weeks. Suction power, mapping sensor, battery life. They're mentally exhausted and finally stuck between two brands.
And here is that breaking point that determines the fate of the brands. The first brand continues to boast to itself on the product page, "We have the most powerful motor. We use the industry standard laser." The second brand plays the game on a completely different level. They throw that striking hook right in the center of the page. How did we solve Mary's hair ordeal with her two cats?
A tremendous move. And right below it, there are 5-star reviews from thousands of pet owners who personally use that vacuum, along with unfiltered real home photos. When the customer sees that page, they instantly stop comparing motor power or that fancy laser sensor.
Because the comforting sentence, "Thousands of people experiencing the same problem as me can't be wrong," comes to mind deep down. The customer transfers the entire bill and risk of that indecision and a potential mistake to those thousands of people. The add to cart button is no longer a risky expense. It's a safe haven tested and approved by the crowd.
A flawless solution to mental deadlock and the complete reset of risk perception. So how does the same equation work on the B2B side, where very high budget figures are discussed? Imagine you are selling an ERP, that is, Enterprise Resource Planning software. You have a general manager in front of you who will approve that budget.
Your sales team saying, "Our infrastructure is very secure, our codes are error-free," makes no impact at that table because the general manager knows very well that every brand praises its own product. But when you place a real case study of another company from the same industry, for instance, one experiencing the same logistics crises, in front of that executive, and present the solution and benefit you created for them, the rules of the game are rewritten.
How did logistics company X reduce its warehouse costs by 20% after switching to our system? Listen from the mouth of the company CEO themselves. A general manager watching this video is no longer just paying for a software infrastructure, right?
Absolutely not. They are now investing in that guarantee of success, personally tested, paid for, and approved by a respected colleague in their own industry. Those bright slogans a brand throws around on its own always remain weak in the face of the power of real experience and social validation.
So the rule is clear. The modern consumer may refuse to enter that linear funnel. However, while drowning in a sea of indecision, they never give up following the footsteps of their peers and the crowd similar to them.
We transferred the burden of decision to the crowd and built trust with social proof. Is this always enough for customers to take the final step, meaning to make the purchase? Sometimes the consumer believes the voice of the crowd, but seeks the approval of an expert to completely erase that final logical doubt in their mind. This is exactly our third trump card on the table: expert assurance.
A very valid point. Social proof tells the consumer this product is popular and tested. Expert assurance, however, says this product is technically the rightest choice. Let's concretize this with a case immediately. Let's say you are selling a next-generation skincare serum with completely natural ingredients. Hundreds of users have commented saying it was very good for my skin.
The customer reads these comments and relaxes, but right before entering their credit card information, the moment they see an independent dermatologist review or a reliable laboratory seal of approval right next to that product, that's when the process is completed. Deep down, the customer says, "The crowd liked it, but if this expert also approved, I am giving my money to the most correct product." At the end of the day, they have received that assurance they needed.
The same rule works down to the millimeter in the corporate B2B market as well. When a general manager lost among competing softwares sees the Price Performance Leader of the Year badge given by an independent tech platform on your site, that risk perception is reset to zero because they have transferred the technical responsibility of the decision to that expert too.
Risk is zeroed, trust is complete. But there's still a very critical snag we need to solve. The credit card is still in the wallet. Why? Because the human brain is programmed to procrastinate. The customer says, "Okay, I found what I was looking for. I'll comfortably place the order when I get home in the evening," and moves the mouse up to close that tab.
When the customer closes that tab, there is a risk of them re-entering the messy middle, meaning falling into the laps of your competitors. This is exactly when you must use the fourth and final trigger to prevent them from closing that tab and complete the sale that very second. The power of now.
You shouldn't give the customer that luxury of procrastination. Waiting always carries the risk of falling back into that loop. Right at that moment, the promise appearing on the screen, "Order today by 1600, have it at your door tomorrow morning," fuels that instant desire for possession. It destroys the friction that waiting would bring.
The equation is the same if you are selling a corporate service. The message "approve now and let's start the integration within 2 hours" eliminates that wait, because human psychology always prefers an instant solution over a larger future promise.
When we put the picture together, the resulting scene is this. That modern consumer who refused to enter the funnel from the very beginning, lost among tabs, first relaxes with decision filters, then zeroes his risk with the crowd's approval and expert assurance.
And finally, turning their impatience into action with that instant delivery promise, they exit that never-ending research loop and quietly drop into your cash register.
The picture is quite clear and just as brutal. We've examined how the marketing funnel has become dysfunctional and how your brand investments in that messy middle are turning into your competitor's customer acquisition budget. So, how do we stop this loss?
The answer is that we need to become decision architects, lightening the customer's mental load and guiding them to make the decision in your favor.
Where and how to efficiently allocate your budget to build this architecture, and how to stop funding your competitors are topics far too important to be squeezed into the end of a video.
To make sure you don't miss the second part of our video series, subscribe to our channel right now and turn on the notification bell. Start thinking about those invisible crocs in your own middle area today.
Don't just be a player in your category, be the decision architect who guides the decisions. We'll see you at the Insight Atlas strategy table for part 2. Goodbye.